There's a little bed and breakfast on the outskirts of town that few people know about. Travelers who wander too far off the highway sometimes find it by mistake. A quaint old place with ivy crawling up the stone walls, run by a quiet old woman named Mrs. Thorne. But there's one rule: never book room 13. Lana was a weary traveller, driving through the night when her car broke down near the bed and breakfast. She had no choice but to walk through the misty woods until she spotted the dim glow of lights. Mrs. Thorne greeted her at the door with a soft smile. "Do you have a room available?" Lana asked, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. Mrs. Thorne hesitated, glancing at the dusty ledger on her desk. "We have one room left, dear." "But it's room 13. Lana raised an eyebrow. "Why does that matter?" "It's an old superstition," Mrs. Thorne said quietly. "That room. Some say it's haunted." Lana chuckled. "I don't believe in ghosts." Reluctantly, Mrs. Thorne handed her the key. "Very well, but remember, if you hear anything unusual, don't look into the mirror." Lana laughed off the warning, thinking it was just an attempt to spook the guests. She climbed the creaky staircase and unlocked the door to room 13. It was a simple room: wooden floors, a small bed, and an old, tarnished mirror hanging on the wall. The mirror was strange, though. Its surface seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the glass was not quite solid. Too tired to care, Lana collapsed into bed and quickly fell asleep. At 3 a.m, Lana awoke to a strange sound, a faint scratching like nails tapping lightly against glass. Groggy, she sat up in bed and glanced toward the mirror. Nothing. She dismissed it as her imagination and lay back down, pulling the covers over her head. Then she heard it again, louder this time. Tap, tap, tap. The noise was coming from inside the mirror. Her heart pounded as she sat up again, squinting through the darkness. A shadow seemed to move within the glass, something faint and human-shaped. Lana blinked, her breath catching in her throat. The figure was clearer now, a woman's face, pale and twisted, staring back at her from the mirror. But it wasn't Lana's reflection. The woman's lips were moving, though no sound came out, and her hollow eyes were locked on Lana's. Slowly, the figure raised a hand and began tapping the inside of the mirror again. Tap, tap, tap. Lana froze, unable to move or look away. The woman's mouth stretched into a grotesque smile, her fingers scraping harder against the glass. Suddenly the tapping stopped. The figure in the mirror leaned forward as if to step out. Lana's instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs wouldn't move. The woman's hand pressed against the inside of the glass, slowly pushing through, the surface rippling as if the mirror were made of water. Lana's paralysis broke. She scrambled out of bed and bolted for the door, slamming it shut behind her. Heart racing, she fled down the stairs to find Mrs. Thorne waiting in the lobby, her expression grim. "I warned you," Mrs. Thorne whispered, shaking her head. "That's not your reflection in the mirror. It's hers." Lana looked back at the stairs, her skin crawling as she realized what Mrs. Thorne meant. The woman in the mirror had once stayed in room 13, long ago, and now she was trying to trade places with her. Lana left that night, never looking back, and room 13 remains vacant to this day. But every so often guests hear faint tapping from behind its locked door. Tap, tap, tap.